The year is 1941, and the skies over Europe bleed with the colors of conquest. From the frozen fjords of Norway to the sun-baked plains of Libya, the Luftwaffe reigns unchallenged. Messerschmitt Bf 109s slice through the air like silver falcons, their Daimler-Benz engines snarling a symphony of supremacy. Pilots like Erich Sommer, a boyish ace with a mustache trimmed sharp as a bayonet, rack up kills with the casual precision of a butcher at market. 28 victories by 24 years old, each one a notch on the ebony handle of his pistol, a testament to the Reich's unyielding myth. We are the masters of the ether, Sommer thinks, banking his fighter into a victory roll over a smoldering English convoy. The sky bends to our will. Adolf Glunz, older, harder-edged, with scars from the Battle of Britain etched into his cheeks like lightning cracks, commands from the cockpit of his FW-190. He shot down Spitfires over Dover, shredded bombers in the Ruhr. His radio crackles with the voices of the Jagdflieger, the hunter pilots, trading boasts in clipped Teutonic bursts. Another Tommy down, Glunz reports, his voice a gravelly hymn to Aryan purity. Hitler's doctrine pulses through their veins, racial destiny forged in fire and fuel. The Luftwaffe isn't just an air force, it's the vanguard of the Übermensch, destined to eclipse the mongrel skies of the Allies. They laugh at the Americans, those latecomers with their untested machines and divided hearts. Yankees? Sommer snorts into his oxygen mask during a briefing in a fog-shrouded Bavarian airfield. They'll fold like their jazz records under the first real storm. But across the Atlantic, in the humid cradle of the American South, a different storm brews. Not of thunder, but of thunderous silence. The United States Army Air Corps, that sprawling bureaucracy of brass and ambition, mirrors the Reich in its own poisoned way. Jim Crow's shadow stretches long over the bases, where white pilots train under the watchful eyes of instructors who see the future in terms of bloodlines, not blueprints. Flight schools in California and Texas hum with the whine of Stearman biplanes, but the hangars are segregated by skin. Black recruits, dreaming of wings since the Wright brothers' first liftoff, are funneled into a footnote. The Tuskegee experiment. It's no grand vision, this program. Born of Eleanor Roosevelt's quiet insistence and a Supreme Court nudge against total exclusion, it's a concession dressed as progress. In the red clay fields of Alabama, on a patch of land donated by a white philanthropist who half expected it to fail, Tuskegee Institute rises like a defiant spire. The airfield, Moton Field, they call it, smells of pine sap and aviation dope, the chemical tang of fabric glue binding canvas to wood. Here, in 1941, the first class assembles, 60-odd young men, sons of sharecroppers and Pullman porters, valedictorians from Negro colleges, all with eyes fixed on the horizon. They arrive in chartered buses that cough dust along Highway 80, their uniforms starched but their spirits braced for the barbs. Chief among them is Benjamin O. Davis, Jr., a West Point graduate whose 4 years there were a masterclass in isolation. No meals shared, no barracks banter, just the cold architecture of prejudice. They spoke to me only through the chain of command, Davis reflects, staring at his reflection in a hangar window, the glass fogged by his breath. At 28, he's all angles, sharp jaw, sharper gaze, a man who has learned to lead with the weight of unspoken slurs. Appointed commander of the 99th Pursuit Squadron, he stands before his pilots under a merciless July sun. The heat shimmers off the tarmac, turning the world liquid. "Gentlemen," Davis says, his voice steady as a metronome, "we are not here to beg for seats at their table. We are here to build our own sky." The training begins at dawn, when the cicadas still hum their Alabama lullaby. Instructors, white men from the civilian pilot training program, shipped south with clipboards and skepticism, circle like hawks. Captain Noel Parrish, a lanky Virginian with a drawl that hides his heresy, is the rare exception. He believes in merit over melanin, but even he fields the whispers from Washington. This is an experiment. Prove it won't work, and we shut it down. The cadets solo in PT-17 Stearmans, those yellow-bellied trainers that buck like unbroken colts. Sweat soaks their flight suits, dripping onto the stick as they wrestle with stalls and spins. One recruit, a wiry kid from Detroit named Charles Hall, grips the controls until his knuckles bleach, murmuring prayers his grandmother taught him. "Lord, let these wings remember they're mine." But the laughter starts early, insidious as rust. In the officers' clubs of Maxwell Field, 30 miles north, white cadets clink glasses to toasts laced with venom. Tuskegee? More like Tuskegee folly, one lieutenant drawls, his cheeks flushed with bourbon. Those boys couldn't tell a throttle from a banjo. The jokes migrate north to the Pentagon, where generals pore over maps stained with coffee rings. If they can fly half as well as they pick cotton, one chuckles, we might let 'em ferry planes stateside. The press picks it up. Negroes in the cockpit? A risky gamble, headlines the Chicago Tribune, as if the Wright Flyer itself were at stake. Across the ocean, the mockery finds fertile ground. Luftwaffe intelligence, sifting Allied dispatches like a miner panning for weakness, latches onto the Tuskegee tales. In a dimly lit Abteilung room in Berlin, under the flicker of a Zeiss projector, grainy photos of Moton Field flicker on a screen. Sommer leans back in his chair, a cigarette dangling from his lips, exhaling smoke that curls like contrails. American Schwarze pilots? He translates with a bark of laughter, slapping the table so hard the ashtrays rattle. Gluns, nursing a bandaged hand from a recent skirmish, joins in, a deep, rumbling guffaw that echoes off the concrete walls. Hitler will love this. Proof the Allies are desperate. Imagine, a squadron of cotton pickers against our eagles. Heinz Behr, the mustachioed maestro with over 200 kills, strolls in mid-chordal, his iron cross glinting. "Let them come," he says, pouring schnapps into jelly glasses. "We'll paint the clouds with their blood. Schwarze Ritter, Black Knights, more like black jokes." The radio broadcasts amplify it. Lord Haw-Haw's nasal sneer crackles over shortwave from Hamburg. The Yankee experiment inequality takes to the air. Colored aviators, trained by the lowest bidders. How fitting for a mongrel nation. In Alabama, the cadets hear echoes on smuggled sets, the words slithering under their skin like barbed wire. But Davis gathers them at dusk, the sun bleeding orange across the runway, and speaks without notes. "Let them laugh," he says, his eyes locking on each face. Hall's determined squint, Lee Archer's quiet fire, Roscoe Brown's thoughtful nod. Laughter is the sound of fear disguised. We will answer with altitude. Yet the prejudice cuts deeper than jests. Funding trickles like a faulty carburetor. The 99th gets cast-off trainers, no night flying gear, instructors rotated out before loyalty can form. A drill sergeant, borrowed from infantry stock, barks orders laced with slurs, "Move like you mean it, boy, or we'll ground you before you lift off." One evening, after a grueling cross-country hop, a cadet named Mac Ross crumples a newspaper cartoon in his fist. A caricatured black pilot, tangled in his parachute, captioned "Up, up, and away." To where? The barracks fall silent. The only sound, the distant thrum of a cooling engine. We are ghosts already, Ross thinks, haunting a sky that doesn't want us. But Davis, overhearing the rustle, steps into the lamplight. "Burn it," he commands, striking a match himself. The flames dance, devouring the ink. Our story isn't written in their papers. It's etched in the contrails we'll leave. By 1942, the experiment hardens into resolve. The first-class graduates, 13 strong, wings pinned under a sky heavy with promise and peril. They pose for photos, arms linked, grins defiant against the lens. Parrish, watching from the sidelines, shakes his head at the doubters in his mind. These aren't boys playing soldier, they're forging something unbreakable. The squadron deploys south to a staging base in Tunis, where the Mediterranean wind carries salt and the faint rot of war. Whispers follow them, from B-25 crews nursing hangovers, from P-40 pilots with sun-bleached scarves. Red tails? What's that? A minstrel show? A major from the 15th Air Force jeers, eyeing their experimental paint job, crimson tails to spot them in the melee, or so the brass claims. It's camouflage for prejudice, a way to blame them when the inevitable crash comes. In Berlin, the laughter swells into propaganda reels. Newsreels in UFA theaters show mock dogfights, white actors in leather helmets downing cartoonish foes with banjos for guns. Audiences roar, but Gluns, catching a screening between sorties, feels a twinge, unnameable, like a premonition in the gut. The sky is vast, he muses, staring at the screen's afterglow. What shadows does it hide? The world laughed, but the sky doesn't laugh for long. The Alabama dawn cracks open like a reluctant eyelid, spilling gold across Moton Field's ragged perimeter. It's June 1942, and the air hangs thick with the scent of magnolia blossoms, wilting under the assault of Pratt & Whitney radials. The Tuskegee Cadets, now swelling to the ranks of the 100th Pursuit Squadron, precursors to the mighty 332nd, rise before the roosters, their boots grinding red grit into the tarmac. Sleep is a luxury rationed like gasoline. Instead, they chase the horizon in Stearman PT-17s, those open cockpit relics that feel more like kites than killers. The wind lashes their faces, raw as the slurs that trail them from the mess hall. Up here, the world's flat, Charles Hall thinks, banking into a lazy 8, the horizon tilting like a drunkard's gaze. No color lines in the blue, but on the ground, the lines are etched deep. Training isn't just flight, it's alchemy, transmuting boys into pilots under the hammer of humiliation. Captain Parrish, that outlier with his pipe clenched like a talisman, pushes them harder than the curriculum demands. Precision isn't optional, he barks during a formation drill, his voice cutting through the chorus of idling props. It's your shield. The squadron forms up in V's of 3. 86 Texan advanced trainers growling in unison, their cowls painted a defiant gloss black. But the white instructors, loaned from Godman Field, their faces pinched with the unease of men policing a dream, circle with clipboards like vultures. One, a ruddy-cheeked major named Clark, times their loops with a stopwatch, his mutters lost in the slipstream. Sloppy, like they're afraid to commit. It's code for not like us, a whisper that echoes in the demerit logs, where minor stalls bloom into attitude deficiencies. Benjamin O. Davis Jr. sees it all, his command tent a Spartan bunker of maps and morale. At 30, he's a ghost in his own uniform, West Point's silent sentinel, where silence was survival. They froze me out, he recalls, folding a letter from his father, the elder Davis, Buffalo soldier turned general, whose words arrive like contrails. Endure, son. The sky has no prejudice. Now, Davis wields that endurance like a rudder, steadying the squadron through the gales of doubt. Mornings begin with his briefings, delivered on a crate under the hangar eaves, rain pattering like Morse code on the tin roof. We fly tight, he says, his finger tracing invisible echelons on the damp wood. Not for show, for survival. The enemy won't care about your skin, he'll care about your wingman. His eyes, dark pools of resolve, sweep the circle. Lee Archer, the New York lawyer's son with a grin that hides a philosopher's doubt. Roscoe Brown, the Brooklyn teacher whose hands tremble not from fear but from the weight of unscribed histories. Mac Ross, the stoic mechanic who fixes engines with prayers etched in grease. The drills escalate into brutality. Dogfight simulations pit them against each other in mock furballs, the Texans twisting in mock combat over the piney woods. Sweat beads on brows, soaking the silk scarves meant for chafing, not choking. One afternoon, under a sky bruised purple by thunderheads, Hall peels off too sharp in a thock weave, clipping Archer's wingtip in a spark of aluminum. The plane fishtails, Hall's heart slamming like a loose manifold. Not now, he wills, muscling the stick, the ground rushing up like judgment. He levels out at 50 feet, grass whispering against the wheels, and taxis back to a hail of jeers, from the instructors, not his brothers. Rookie mistake, Clark sneers, jotting notes. Can't have that over Berlin. But Davis intervenes, his voice a low thunder. Error is instruction, Major, not indictment. Later, in the dim glow of the Quonset hut, he pulls Hall aside, the air heavy with the ozone of spent adrenaline. Fear whispers failure, Davis says, clapping a hand on the younger man's shoulder. We shout back with seconds shaved off our turns. Humiliation arrives unannounced, like flak bursts. Off-base liberties in Tuskegee proper are minefields. A diner that serves them at the back door, a theater balcony reeking of exclusion. One night, after a grueling night vision hop, blacked out flights by feel alone, Archer and Brown slip into a roadhouse for coffee, the jukebox crooning Bessie Smith. The barkeep, a ham-fisted local with a sheriff's star pinned crooked, spots their wings and stiffens. Airmen, huh? Y'all fly those things sober? His laugh draws a crowd, white GIs from the segregated base spilling in like floodwater. Bet you navigate by watermelon patches. The words land like 50 cal rounds, hollow points of hate. Brown tenses, his fist curling around a saucer, but Archer's hand on his arm is iron. Not here, Archer thinks, the prop's phantom thrum in his ears a reminder. Save the fight for the fuel that matters. They leave with heads high, the door slamming like a canopy latch, but the sting festers. Back at barracks, the squadron gathers in a circle of cots, the air thick with lucky strikes and unspoken fury. They think we're props, Ross growls, punching his bunk. Davis enters then, silent as a shadow, and kneels among them. Pain is fuel, he says simply. Burn it clean. Tomorrow we fly like they can't imagine. And fly they do, relentless, a forge of flesh and aluminum. By fall, the AT-6s give way to P-40 Warhawks, those shark-mouthed bruisers shipped from Curtiss Wright with paint still tacky. The transition is a trial by fire. Heavier, hungrier for throttle, their Allison engines bellowing like wounded beasts. Formation flying becomes ritual. Tight as a fist, wings overlapping by inches, the sun glinting off crimson tail proposals, a visual hack to track the inferior in combat. Perish, defying orders, drills them in escort tactics. Staying high, weaving protective screens, ignoring the siren call of lone bandits. Your kills come second to the bombers, he insists, sketching vectors on a blackboard scarred by erasers. Let the ego pilots chase glory, you guard the flock. The men internalize it, their creeds whispered in pre-flight huddles. We fight to protect, not to prove. Brown's journal, scrawled by lantern light, captures the alchemy. Discipline isn't chains, it's wings we earn. Winter bites hard, frosting the runways with rime that cracks under tires like brittle bones. Illness sweeps the ranks, dysentery from tainted water, flu from drafty tents. But they push through, medics rationing sulfa like sacraments. One cadet washes out, tears carving tracks in the grime of his face, but Davis sees him off with a handshake, not scorn. The sky rejects no one who tries, he murmurs. It's leadership by example. Davis logs more hours than any, his P-40 christened Sailor Boy after his Annapolis dreams deferred. In quiet moments, he pores over Luftwaffe manuals smuggled via OSS channels, dissecting the finger veer formations that shredded the RAF. They fight with flair, he notes, pencil scratching like claws on chalkboard. We fight with family. Graduation comes in March 1943, under a sky washed clean by spring rains. 62 pilots, wings gleaming on chests, stand at attention as Booker T. Washington watches from a framed portrait in the hangar. Parrish pins Davis's silver bars, his voice thick. You've built more than machines here. You've built a mirror, for all of us. The cheers rise, a roar that drowns the distant rumble of troop trains. But the real test looms, deployment orders crackle over teletype. The 99th, Davis's vanguard, ships to North Africa, staging at Martuba Airfield near Benghazi, a sun-scorched strip ringed by olive groves and minefields. The 332nd follows soon, coalescing under his command, their Mustangs promised, but P-40s for now. Skepticism greets them like a sandstorm. The 12th Air Force, a patchwork of white squadrons nursing grudges from Pantelleria, eyes the newcomers with the wariness of men guarding a feast. Colonel William Momier, a hawk-faced tactician with a drawl like barbed wire, briefs them in a tent slapping against the Libyan gale. You'll fly strafe runs first, he says, not meeting Davis's gaze. Prove you can handle the mess before we trust you with the silverware. His pilots, clustered outside, trade cigarettes and barbs. Chocolate fighters, one calls them, chuckling into his flight cap. Hope they don't melt in the sun. Bomber crews from the 97th, B-17 pilots with frostbitten cheeks from high-altitude runs are blunter. Heard you boys train on banjos. A co-pilot ribs during a shared chow line, his tray heaped with spam. Hall, spoon halfway to mouth, meets the man's eyes. We train on targets, sir, yours included. The first patrols are patrols in name only. Low sweeps over the Mareth line, harrying Axis supply trucks in the dust-choked passes. Flak peppers the air, black puffs blooming like bruises, but the 99th weaves through unscathed, their P-40s dipping low to rake columns with 50 cal fire. Reports trickle back to Algiers, no losses. Accurate hits. Momier squints at the logs, his skepticism cracking like parched earth. In the Luftwaffe outposts across the Med, intelligence officers puzzle over the sightings. Negro squadron, engaging effectively. Sommer, refueling in Sicily after a bomber intercept, overhears the wire traffic and scoffs into his goggles. Propaganda. Wait till they face real wolves. But on a blistering sortie over Cape Bon, the wolves come early. A flight of 4 P-40s led by Davis tangles with Bf-109s probing from Tunis. The Germans dive like arrows, guns winking fire, but the Tuskegee tightens formation, unbreakable, a porcupine of lead. Hall bags his first, a 109 trailing smoke into the sea, its pilots shoot a fleeting white bloom. Back at Martuba, as the ground crew swarms with chocks and cheers, Davis lands last, his engine coughing to silence. The debrief is electric. No egos inflated, just facts exchanged like ammunition. "We held," Archer says, wiping oil from his brow. "That's the win." The skepticism lingers, a fog over the dunes, but the missions mount Pantelleria, Salerno, and the fog thins. Bomber jocks start nodding in passing. "Saw your red tails up there. Kept the bastards off us." It's a seed, this grudging respect, planted in the sand where doubt once bloomed. Davis, charting vectors by lamplight, feels the shift like a tailwind. They see us now, not as experiment but as edge. They weren't trained to be heroes, they were trained to be undeniable. The Mediterranean summer of 1943 unfurls like a bloodied banner, the sea a cauldron of salt and smoke, where Allied fleets choke on the horizon. Operation Husky cracks Sicily open like a walnut under the boot of invasion. B-17s and B-24s thundering from Tunisian dust bowls, their bellies gravid with 1,000-pound eggs. The Luftwaffe, bloodied but unbowed from North Africa, claws back from the boot's jagged heel. Focke-Wulf 190s and Bf-109s rising from Trapani's scarred runways, their pilots hungry for payback. Erich Sommer, his kill tally notched to 32, straps into his 109's cocoon, the leather creaking like old leather-bound sins. The Tommies come again, he thinks, throttling up, the Merlins whine a siren's call to slaughter. But these Yanks, they'll taste the Reich's teeth. From Martuba's baking pads, the 99th Pursuit Squadron, vanguard of the nascent 332nd, lifts off into the fray, their P-40 Warhawks a ragged finger for, crimson tails winking like warning flares. Benjamin O. Davis, Jr. leads Blue Flight, his voice a calm metronome over the crackling RT. "Eyes sharp, gentlemen. Box the bombers, stay tight." Below, the invasion armada crawls. LSTs vomiting Shermans onto red sand beaches, while flak from Mount Etna stitches the sky black. Charles Hall, wingman on Davis's right, feels the prop's pulse sync with his own, a steady thump-thump against the chaos. At 24, he's all sinew and scripture, his flight suit pockets crammed with his mother's psalms, creased from too many pre-dawn prayers. "Lord, make my hands steady as yours," he whispers into the wind, rushing his canopy. The inciting spark ignites over Gila. A swarm of 409s, Summer among them, bores in from the sun like divine judgment. They spot the bomber stream first. 20 Liberators in loose trail, gunners swiveling turrets like paranoid eyes. "Amerikaner! Bomben Volk!" Summer's RT erupts, his laughter a static-laced bark. Easy pickings. Dive. The 109s stoop, cannons spitting tracer comets, shredding a B-24's wing in a bloom of fire. But then the escorts peel down. P-40s, tails afire with that absurd red paint, interposing like dark sentinels. "What the devil?" Jinking left as Hall's burst rakes his stabilizer, aluminum shrieking in protest. The dogfight coils, a ballet of lead and lift, Hall breaking high, then diving in a hammerhead that clips a 109's tail, sending it cartwheeling into the drink. Davis's voice cuts the melee. "Old formation, protect the box." No wild chases, no glory hogs peeling off for kills. The 99th weaves a lethal net, their .50 cal's punctuation to the bomber's desperate pleas. Sommer, nursing smoke from his cowl, breaks off, his wingman trailing flames into the waves. "Verdammt Schwarze Teufel," he snarls, vectoring for home. Back at Trapani, as medics peel off his singed glove, the debrief is a murmur of disbelief. "Red tails," his gunner coughs, hacking phlegm. "They fought like demons, no fear, no scatter." Sommer stares at the ops board, pins marking losses. 2 pilots, 1 plane. Coincidence, he tells himself, lighting a cigarette that tastes of ash. But the seed of doubt germinates, a quiet rot in the myth of mastery. Word spreads like contrails across the Allied beachhead. In the salt-crusted tents of the 47th Bombardment Group, B-25 pilots, sunburned boys from Iowa farms, cluster around a dog-eared mission log. "Heard the 99th flew top cover today," one says, cracking a warm Coke. Not a single lib lost after they showed. Skepticism lingers, laced with the old barbs. Those colored boys must have scared the Krauts with voodoo. But the numbers don't lie. Over Licata, the next dawn, the 99th escorts again, P-40s shepherding Mitchells through a gauntlet of Ju-88s. Lee Archer, cool as a winter Harlem stoop, slots in behind a diving bomber, his burst coring an engine nacelle. The German spirals, shoot blooming late, but Archer doesn't pursue. He climbs back to the weave, eyes on the heavies. "Bomber secure," he reports, voice even. Proof isn't in the kill. he thinks, the sea glittering below like shattered glass. It's in the return. By Anzio's bloody bridgehead, January 1944, the laughter fractures. The Gustav line bleeds allies white, casualties piling like cordwood under Monte Cassino's shadow. But the skies offer no mercy. B-26 Marauders pound the Rapido River, flack a vertical blizzard, and the 332nd, now fully Mustangs, P-51Bs with the red tail screaming defiance, takes the leash. Davis, promoted and unyielding, briefs under an olive-draped awning. Regensburg run tomorrow. Deep into the Reich's parlor. We don't chase, we shield. The men nod, faces etched by months of salt and sorties. Roscoe Brown, sketching tactics on napkins. Mac Ross, oiling his guns with ritual care. Ground crews, Negro mechanics from the 302nd, sleeping under fuselages like faithful hounds, whisper encouragements. Bring her home, Lieutenant, we got the prayers on her. The mission launches at false dawn, 32 Mustangs climbing through the murk, joining a stream of 200 heavies bound for Messerschmitt factories. Hall's White Tiger hums at 25,000 feet, supercharger whining a high, lonesome tune, the Alps' white fangs gnawing the horizon. Then the wolves descend. Heinz bears JG-300, the Green Hearts, vectored by Freya radar, FDU-190s and 109s, 60 strong, plunging from the sun. Engagement. Red-nosed Mustangs. Bear's call crackles, his voice a whip-crack of command. He leads the bounce, cannons hammering a B-17's ball turret, glass and gore spraying like confetti. But the escorts counter. The 332nd Titans, a rolling thunderhead of red tails, denying the Germans clean shots. Stay on the bombers, Davis orders, his Mustang by request carving turns that bleed speed for solidarity. Hall spots his moment, a lone 109, paint chipped like old teeth, boring in on a limping fortress. The bomber's waist gunner waves frantic semaphore, tracers arcsing wild. Hall rolls inverted, the world flipping to azure vertigo, then dives, throttle firewalled, Merlin bellowing judgment. This is for Tuskegee, he intones, sight pipper centering the canopy. 3 bursts, short, surgical, the 109's nose erupting in orange petals. It yaws, wing folding like wet paper, pilot bailing into the slipstream, a tiny figure tumbling toward the fatherland's embrace. Hall's first victory, chalked on his fuselage later by a grinning crew chief, but he banks back without fanfare, rejoining the screen. Splash 1, he reports flatly. Box intact. Below, the B-17's crew whoops over their set. Red tails, you sons of bitches are angels. The return leg is a gauntlet. More bandits probing, flak from Bologna blooming lethal chrysanthemums, but the 332nd holds, losses nil. They land at Foggia under a sky wept clean, props feathering to silence that rings like vindication. Debriefs hum with the electric hush of proof. 20 bombers home, 0 escorts down. Word rockets up the chain. Eisenhower's staff, poring over glossies of red-tailed Mustangs, nods approval. Request the 99th. A 15th Air Force ops officer scribbles on a roster. They don't play, they protect. Even Momier, once the skeptic, concedes in a memo. Discipline exceeds expectations. But within the squadron, it's quieter. Hall stares at his hands, trembling not from G-forces but grace. 1 down, he thinks, but the war's in the weight we carry. Across the lines, in a chalet-turned command post near Lake Garda, Adolf Glunz pores over reconnaissance photos, grainy specks of crimson against cumulus anvils. His latest sortie cost him a wingman, shredded by a Mustang that refused the chase. These Schwarze, he growls to Bear, over ersatz coffees steaming in tin cups. They fight like Spartans, no flair, just fate. Bear, polishing his monocle with a rag stained by victory grease, scoffs but softer now. Propaganda said they'd fold, reports say otherwise. Intelligence briefs multiply, red tails sighted. Engagements 12, losses, 8 Axis, 0 Allied escorts. Sommer, grounded with a sprained wrist, flips through Flugblätter, Luftwaffe leaflets mocking the blackbirds, but crumples one, the ink blurring under sweat. Laughter was easy, he admits inwardly, the fire crackling like distant AA. Truth is heavier. The shift ripples outward. Bomber crews, once trading wary nods, now slap backs in the mess. Get me the red tails, or I'm walking. A B-24 pilot, cheeks hollow from a bailout over Naples, pins a cartoon to his bunk. A devil-horned Mustang with tail aflame captioned Guardian Ghosts. In Tuskegee, letters from home arrive like ballast, wives and mothers reading clippings from the Pittsburgh Courier. 332nd, 0 losses in 50 sorties. But racism's hydra rears too. Scurrilous reports from white squadrons accuse the Red Tails of cowardice, of hanging back like picnic pilots. Davis fields them in Algiers briefings, his jaw a chisel. "Our record is our rebuttal, sir," he tells a stone-faced general laying out the ledger. 1,200 sorties, enemy planes tumbling like autumn leaves. By spring, the legend solidifies. Over Ploesti's oil inferno, the 332nd escorts again. Mustangs painting the sky with disciplined fire, turning Romanian skies into graveyards for He-111s. Roscoe Brown, threading a canyon of cumulus, bags a Ju-87 in a deflection shot that draws whistles from the formation. "Nice work, Red," Archer quips, but Brown's reply is gravity, just keeping the bombers breathing. The Germans adapt, higher sweeps, feints with decoys, but the Red Tails anticipate, their unity a cipher the aces can't crack. In Berlin's war rooms, under the Reich Chancellery's leaden gaze, goring fumes over dispatches. Schwarze escort, unbeaten. The mockery mutates to memos, study tactics. Label, Red Ghosts. One evening, after a milk run over Ancona yields 3 kills and a safe return, the squadron sprawls on Foggia's olive-scented grass. Stars and stripes passed hand to hand. Paul reads aloud a Yank column, the 332nd, where prejudice meets prop wash. Laughter rises, not the enemy's hollow jeer, but warm earned. Davis watches from the hangar shadow, his silhouette sharp against the sunset's pyre. "We've silenced one storm," he reflects, the distant drone of relief flights a lullaby. But the real thunder gathers. The Germans stopped laughing and started counting losses. The Italian autumn of 1944 drapes the Apennines in funeral shrouds of gold and gray, the wind off the Adriatic carrying the faint, acrid bite of high-octane regret. Ramatelli Airfield, a scarred thumbprint on the Adriatic coast, pulses with the reluctant heartbeat of the 332nd Fighter Group. The Red Tails, now a name whispered in bomber briefings like a talisman against the void. P-51D Mustangs, their Merlin engines idling like impatient stallions, squat under camouflage nets woven from olive branches and doubt. Ground crews, those unsung smiths of the forge, hands blackened by 100-octane and prayers, swarm the birds, tweaking cowl flaps and tracing the crimson arcs on vertical stabilizers that have become legend's sigil. "She'll sing today, Captain," one mechanic, a lanky kid from Mobile named Rufus, tells Roscoe Brown, wiping grease from his brow with a forearm tattooed in faded ink. "Sky's my church." Brown nods, his eyes distant as a horizon, the weight of 101 missions carving quiet canyons in his face. At 32, he's no longer the Brooklyn schoolteacher who dreamed of chalkboards over cockpits. He's a sentinel, forged in the anvil of Anzio's gales. The code is etched into their marrow now, this creed of unyielding fidelity: never abandon the bombers. It's not bluster, not the braggadocio of white aces chasing triple digits on fuselage tallies. It's covenant, born in Tuskegee's sweat-soaked dawn patrols, tempered in the Mediterranean's dogfights where ego's lure had claimed lesser wings. Benjamin O. Davis Jr., the group's iron spine, drills it into every pre-flight huddle, his voice a low rumble under the hangar's corrugated groan. "We are the shield, not the sword," he says one fog-shrouded morning, chalk sketching bomber boxes on a salvaged blackboard. "The heavies carry the war's belly, we carry their lives. Break for a kill, and you orphan the formation. Stay true, and the sky bends to us." The pilots, Archer with his lawyer's precision, Hall with his psalmist's poise, Brown with his tactician's gaze, murmur assent, their flight suits stiff with the night's chill. Duty over dazzle, Brown thinks, fingering the silver Tuskegee wings pinned inside his jacket, a talisman against the arrogance that still simmers in rear echelon memos. 332nd, reliable but unproven in deep strikes. The missions have thickened into a relentless tide, each one a deeper thrust into the Reich's vitals. From Foggia's fields, the Red Tails escort the 15th Air Force's Thunder. B-17 Flying Fortresses and B-24 Liberators, lumbering north like ironclad pilgrims, bellies slung with ordnance for the black heart of German industry. Oil refineries at Vienna bleed fire under 500-pound lashes. Marshalling yards at Munich crumple like accordions under delayed fuse sermons. The Luftwaffe, its squadrons bled white by D-Day's maw and the Eastern Front's grinder, responds with desperation's fangs, high-altitude feints, low-level swarms, and now whispers of wonder weapons, jets that outpace sound itself. Eric Sommer, his mustache graying like gunpowder residue, pours over Flugzeugführer dispatches in a half-ruined villa near Augsburg, the fire sputtering on captured French cognac. These red ghosts, he mutters to Glunz, who nurses a bandaged thigh from a Mustang's parting gift over Trieste. They cling like burrs, no brakes, no boasts. Yesterday's raid, 20 heavies home, our Sturmgroup vanished. Glunz, ever the stoic, traces a scar on his map. Arrogance was our blindfold. Now we hunt the hunters. But in their eyes flickers the unspoken. The myth cracks. The climax gathers like thunder over Berlin. March 24, 1945, Big Week's savage coda, a 1300 bomber armada clawing into the Reich's frozen lungs. Target, 5 airfields encircling the capital, cradles of the Luftwaffe's last gasp. Davis's 332nd draws the spear tip, 60 Mustangs, divided into flights of 12, tasked with deep escort from the IP, initial point, over the Elbe. Dawn breaks bloody, the Adriatic a hammered sheet of copper as the group lifts off. Wheels up salute to the ground crews who wave from blast pens, their faces masks of held breath. Brown's unnamed slots into green flight, throttle quadrant a familiar extension of his palm. The Merlin's supercharger whining a high requiem as they climb to 30,000 feet. The bomber stream materializes like a silver river. 814 heavies from the 8th and 15th, their contrails a vast, vulnerable nebula. Rendezvous confirmed, Davis's voice crackles, steady as sextant stars. Tails up, eyes out, we own the box. The penetration is a gauntlet of ice and ire. At 28,000 feet, the Alps' breath freezes oxygen lines, masks fogging with the ghosts of exhaled prayers. Flak from the Ruhr, those 88mm serpents, stitches the formation with black punctuation. Shells bursting in lazy chrysanthemums that pepper wings with shrapnel kisses. A B-17 in the low squadron takes a direct hit, her number 4 engine blooming orange, but Brown's flight dives instinctively, not to chase, but to cover the cripple's wobble. Green 1 to bombers, we've got you, Brown transmits, his Mustang slicing low, guns live but leash taut. Hall on his left mirrors the weave, tracers arcing wide to cow the shadows. Hold the line, Brown wills, the altimeter spinning like a prayer wheel. Below, the fatherland unfolds in defiant patchwork. Autobahns like gray veins, factories belching defiance under the Armada's shadow. Then the jets scream in, Messerschmitt Me-262s, the Reich's fever dream made steel, twin Jumo 04s hurling them at 540 miles per hour, faster than God's own wrath. 24 of them, from JG-7's elite, vectored by desperate ground control, Schwalben angreifen, zerstört die Escort. Heinz Baer, commanding from the lead swarm, feels the rush like absolution, his cockpit a jewel box of instruments glowing emerald. 60 victories etched on his soul, but this is the future uncorked. Dive on the Mustangs, he orders, the 262s stooping from 36,000 feet like silver lances, their 4 30mm cannons hungry for the red-tailed interlopers. The first pass is apocalypse. A fortress shreds mid-wing, debris blooming like a metal rose. Another Liberator yaws, her crew bailing into the abyss. Bandits at 12 high. Archer's warning keens over the RT, static-laced panic threading the chorus. Davis's response is granite. Hold formation, don't break, draw 'em in. Brown spots his quarry first. A 262, paint virgin as sin, boring in on a staggered B-24, whose gunners blaze futile defiance. The jet's speed is a blur, a silver streak etching vapor ghosts, but Brown reads the turn like scripture, predicting the roll from a flicker of aileron, the pilot's arrogance in the straight-line charge. He's fast but predictable. Brown intones, heart sinking to the Merlin's throb, a steady ba-boom against the chaos. He kicks rudder, rolls inverted, the world inverting to sapphire vertigo, then yanks into a lead pursuit, supercharger howling as he closes the impossible gap. The 262 jinks, cannons winking fire that stitches empty sky, but Brown anticipates, his K-14 sight pipper dancing on the jet's nacelle. Fox 3, he breathes, thumbing the trigger. 3 short bursts, disciplined as Davis's creed, 50 cal rounds arsing in golden scimitars. The first burst clips the wing root, aluminum vaporizing in a sparkler cascade. The second cores the fuselage, instruments shattering like fine china. The third, is punctuation, slamming the tailplane into crumpling ruin. The Me-262 yaws violently, left engine flaming a comet's tail, Bear's wingman cartwheeling earthward in a silent scream. Splash 1. Brown's call is calm, almost conversational. As he eases back on the stick, bleeding speed to rejoin the weave. But the jet isn't done. Limping on one turbine, it ghosts low, hunting a straggler fortress whose number 2 is feathered. Brown dives again, the altimeter unwinding like a doomsday clock. G-forces pinning him to the seat like judgment's hand. For the boys in the greenhouse, he thinks of Tuskegee's barracks, the laughter they'd earned this day. The second burst finds the cockpit, canopy erupting in a halo of glass and fate. The 262 tumbles. Pilots form a fleeting silhouette against the pyre. In the melee's heart, the revelation uncoils. Hall bags another, his tracers coring at 262's belly mid-turn. Archer deflects a third, forcing it fuel-starved into the clouds. Davis's by request dances death in the center. Denying clean shots, the red tails a crimson veil over the bomber's steel. Bear, witnessing the carnage from his untouched perch, feels the myth shatter like canopy plexiglass. 3 jets down to the red tail's unyielding phalanx, the rest scattering like scolded crows. "Abbrechen! Break off," he snarls, vectoring for base, his RT a tomb of silence where boasts once reigned. Sommer, trailing smoke from a glancing hit, ejects over the hards, his chute a white surrender against the pines. Ghosts, he thinks, tumbling with wings of fire. The bombers press on, ordnance thundering into Oranienburg's runways, concrete fracturing like broken oaths. Losses mount, 23 heavies to the jet's scythe, but under the 332nd's watch, the Corps holds. 179 bombers return, the statistical miracle etched in after-action glow. They land at Ramitelli as dusk bleeds the sky purple, props feathering to a hush broken only by the ground crew's roar. Embraces, backslaps, tears carving clean paths through grime. Brown taxis to a halt, canopy sliding back on rails greased by faith, the air alive with the scent of burnt oil and unbroken dawn. Davis greets him at dispersal, hand extended like a bridge across chasms. "You turned the tide, Roscoe." Brown shakes it, the grip ironclad. "We all did, sir," the code held. In Berlin's bunkers, the silence deepens. Luftwaffe command, sifting wreckage photos, the red paint on tail fragments, a scarlet accusation. Goring's successors mutter of untermenschen miracles. But the truth seeps like radiator fluid. Arrogance's empire ends not in thunder, but in the quiet return of silver birds. Bomber crews, debriefing in East Anglia's Nissen huts, toast with watered scotch, red tails or bust. Hall, scribbling a letter home by lantern, pauses at the window, the stars unmoved witnesses. "We didn't chase the jets," he reflects, "we outlasted them. They came for bombers and found angels with red wings." The spring of 1945 dawns not with fanfare, but with the ragged gasp of a continent exhaling its last poisoned breath. Over the Rhine's muddy sprawl, the 332nd Fighter Group thunders on one final pilgrimage, escorting B-29s toward the industrial corpse of the Ruhr, where factories lie gutted like beached leviathans. The P-51s, their crimson tails faded to rust under the relentless Italian sun, climb into a sky streaked with the contrails of surrender. Roscoe Brown, logging his 68th mission, feels the Merlin's thrum as a weary heartbeat. The altimeters spin, a countdown to something unnameable. "We've guarded the gates," he thinks, scanning the empty azure for phantoms that no longer prowl. "Now the ghosts guard us." Below, the fatherland fractures. Autobahns choked with refugees, Luftwaffe hangars yawning empty, the aces' laughter long since silenced by the whine of retreating turbines. Victory in Europe lands with a thud, not a thunderclap. May 8th VE Day, proclaimed over crackling radios in Ramitelli's Quonset huts, where the pilots sprawl on canvas cots, faces slack with the hollow of survival. No parades here, just the metallic tang of cooling engines and the distant pop of celebratory 45s from white squadrons down the line. Benjamin O. Davis Jr. gathers the 332nd at dusk, the Adriatic's hush broken only by the lap of waves on mine-scarred pilings. "We've flown the impossible," he says, his voice a quiet forge hammer, eyes tracing the circle of faces. Hall's shadowed gaze, Archer's wry half-smile, Brown's steady nod. "Not for medals, but for mornings like this. The war ends, but our watch doesn't." They toast with captured schnapps, glasses clinking like spent casings, but the silence after is profound, a vacuum where adrenaline once roared. What now? Hall wonders. Staring at the stars pricking the canopy of night, the sky's ours, but the ground remembers. The unraveling begins with the POWs, threads of crimson pulled from the Reich's unraveling tapestry. Word crackles over teletype. 25 Tuskegee Airmen, scattered in the wake of deep penetration raids held in Stalag Luft 1 and 3. Those frozen hells of barbed wire and bread rations. Lieutenant Alexander Jefferson, a St. Louis schoolteacher turned Mustang jockey, emerges from the shadows of Barth, his frame gaunt as a winter sparrow, eyes burning with the unquenched fire of 53 missions. Captured over Munich in June 44, his B-24 flak riddled into the Bavarian pines, he'd endured the Schwarze taunts and interrogations, Luftwaffe officers waving dossiers of Tuskegee experiments like indictments. "You flew with discipline," one captor, a downed bomber pilot with a philosopher's drawl, had admitted over watery soup one gray afternoon. "We expected chaos. Instead, you were our mirror." Jefferson, paring an apple with a smuggled blade, had met the man's gaze. "Mirrors crack both ways, Herr Oberleutnant. Yours showed monsters. Ours showed men." The liberations unfold like reluctant reels. P-51s from the 479th buzz the camps in mock strafes, wings wagging triumph over skeletal prisoners waving from the dust. But for the red tails, it's personal. Flights dispatched to scoop their brothers from Dulag Luft's maw. C-47s landing on cratered strips amid the cheers of emaciated Brits and Yanks. Sergeant William Madison, a ground crew wizard who'd once jury-rigged a Merlin mid-mission with baling wire, reunites with his pilot in a Frankfurt hangar, the embrace fierce as a victory roll. "Thought the angels got you, Sarge," the lieutenant chokes, uniform hanging loose on bones once honed by Harlem hoops. Madison, wiping dust from his eyes, claps the man's back. "Nah, Cap'n. Just borrowed wings from the Krauts." The returns swell Ramitelli, tales traded over spam and smokes of mock dogfights with guards, of smuggling maps in Bible pages, of the quiet defiance that turns cells into cockpits. Yet beneath the reunions simmers the sting. White squadrons repatriated first, their heroes feted with ice cream and Ike's handshakes, while the 332nd waits in the queue, their losses tallied in footnotes. Homecoming is a bitter cocktail, poured in the sweltering holds of Liberty ships churning across the Atlantic. June fades into July, the group disbanding under a sky heavy with monsoon promise. Mustangs mothballed in crates bound for scrap or stateside museums. Davis boards the USS West Point at Naples, his duffel light with letters from a wife who'd rationed hope like fuel. The crossing is a limbo of lectures and limbo, GIs crammed cheek to jowl, the air thick with brine and body odor, seasickness a great leveler. Whispers snake through the ranks. Heard the brass wants to court-martial Davis for insubordination. Kept his boys too safe, they say. It's the old Hydra, heads multiplying. Racism's refusal to die with the Reich. In Washington, memos circulate like flak, accusations of cowardice recycled from Anzio, now laced with the venom of victory's envy. The 332nd flew conservative, one general scrawls, ignoring the ledger. 179 escort missions, 27 bomber losses against the 15th Air Force average of 46. Archer, bunked amid the clamor, reads the Pittsburgh Courier's smuggled edition by flashlight, the headlines a balm and a barb. Red tails return, heroes or handouts. Stateside, the silence deepens into segregation's chokehold. They dock at Newport News under a Virginia sky spitting rain, the stars and stripes limp as forgotten laundry. No bands, no banners, just Negro stevedores loading crates under Jim Crow's watchful eye, directing the airmen to colored cars on the troop train north. Freeman Field, Indiana, staging for demobilization, welcomes them with locked latrines and jeering MPs. Back to the fields, boys? Or are you flying cotton now? The mutiny simmers. 101 officers, led by a furious Mac Ross, refuse to sign into segregated barracks, their stand a quiet thunderclap that echoes to the Pentagon. Courts-martial loom, Davis testifying in crisp blues, his voice a scalpel dissecting prejudice. "We fought for a nation that wouldn't fight for us," he tells the board, the room thick with pipe smoke and unspoken shame. The charges dissolve like morning fog, but the victory is Pyrrhic. Transfers to Godman Field, Kentucky, a backwater base where P-40s gather dust and dreams curdle. The long road to justice stretches like a cracked runway, potholed with post-war pragmatism. The 332nd deactivates in October, its pilots scattered to reserves and civilian cockpits. Archer to New York's legal briefs, Brown to Lincoln University's lecterns, Hall to Tuskegee's alumni halls. Medals arrive tardy, wrapped in the tissue of apology. Distinguished flying crosses pinned in quiet ceremonies, the Congressional Gold Medal, a distant mirage until 2006. when Bush's White House finally bestows it en masse. But in 45, recognition is rationed. Press clippings in the Amsterdam News, a fleeting Yank profile buried between pinups. One pilot, downed over Austria and walking home through lines of liberated camps, encounters a cluster of Tuskegee nurses, their Red Cross arms a beacon. "You flew for us too," one whispers, tears carving paths through powder. He nods, the weight of unseen eyes pressing. "We all flew for tomorrow." The legacy crystallizes in numbers, cold as altimeter readings, but warm as hearthside reckonings. 179 missions without a bomber lost to enemy fire, a statistical saint, etched in Air Force annals. 66 confirmed kills, but the true tally is in the absences. The empty bunks of bomber crews who returned to wives and waiting sons, the unbroken chains of command that turned doubt to doctrine. In the Pentagon's vaulted halls, where once generals scoffed, the 332nd's tactics become textbook, escort doctrine rewritten in crimson ink. They taught us protection over pursuit, a post-war manual notes, the words a quiet requiem. Decades weave their tapestry. The 50s integration of the Air Force, Davis rising to general's stars, his West Point silence shattered by salutes from once silent peers. The 60s bring films, red tails and flickering reels, Robert Taylor's voice lending gravitas to grainy footage. By the millennium, schoolchildren recite their creed. Museums mount Mustangs with tails repainted fresh, the Smithsonian cradling by request like a family heirloom. Reunions draw the graying eagles to Tuskegee's emerald lawns, Jefferson now a jeweler with hands still steady on sticks, toasting with grandsons who fly F-16s. "We didn't break," he tells them, the sun gilding his wings so you wouldn't have to. Yet the emotional crescendo lingers in the interstices, the letters yellowing in attics, the wives who mended flight jackets with stitches of steel. One night in 47, Brown dreams of Berlin's skies, the Me-262's pyre blooming eternal, and wakes to his daughter's voice. "Daddy, did you win?" He pulls her close, the scent of her curls mingling with phantom avgas. "Sweetheart," he murmurs, winning was coming home whole. The silence after victory, that profound hush when arrogance meets its mirror, echoes still, in the contrails of modern jets, in the quiet courage of those who guard not just skies but souls. History remembered the red tails for what they didn't lose, their bombers, their honor, their humanity. If you believe the greatest victories happen in silence, subscribe for more untold World War II stories.